Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of the Cultural Resets Artist Interview Series. We are here, Nick and Shay, with an incredible artist. We're here with John Ying, who is a breakdancer coach with a company called Definitely Inc. So we're happy to have you, John. Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate it.
So let's start if you would like to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started with breakdancing.
Sure. So my name is John Ying. I have been breakdancing for many years. Back in 2000, I was going to a dance event for my school, and there was a big circle, and I was just curious what was going on in this circle. It seems like there was something that grabbed everyone's attention. There was someone in the middle that was breakdancing, and it really struck me. After the event concluded, I started learning how online. And I would start with simple ideas and simple moves. First, I went to breakdance.com. And from there, I just started learning simple moves and started building on that. I downloaded videos and tried to watch the videos very closely. And I'm very much aware of my movements, and I'm self-taught. And most of the time I am solo, even though I do have a friend that's in the field as well, but no one really taught me. I relied very much on the web and videos that I could find. And so it worked to a certain degree, but it was a very slow and painful process. Dancing is not easy to learn. So your body does get sore, and you have to get through the soreness and the physical pain. And I saw the growing pains around age, I believe 14. I was around the age 14 when I really started. I started working with the learning more and growing as I was, growing to adulthood. And there was someone that found me breakdancing, reached out to me, and invited me to come to Boston. There were many people there. There was a crew there, and I started practicing with their crew, working with them, and I had to commute, which was about a 40-minute commute from where they were meeting. So it was a little bit tough for me. Plus, I wasn't really comfortable driving at the age where I started joining, meeting up with the crew. And you know how Boston traffic is. It's not great. So I started associating with the crew and learning more and going to different events and hanging out with people from the breakdance community. And it was just a wonderful experience. It's a very different world. I grew up in the predominantly white suburbs, and the breakdancing community / hip hop community was a very different, jarring experience for me. It was a bit, I was a bit taken aback as I started integrating myself into that culture, especially as a POC. But I was exposed to a lot more, of course, in that crew than what I grew up with, what I was used to, Asians as well, specifically. So it was really great to see the diversity and be exposed to that.
Wow, that's yeah.
That takes a lot of strength and ability to be willing to fall and hurt yourself when you're dancing, to teach yourself with YouTube videos. I'm sure there was a lot of like falling and bruises and strength building.
I was gonna say like that's impressive that you were able to just teach yourself. I mean, we've gotten a chance to watch some of your work too, and like that is crazy that you like taught yourself. You started off that way, and like you just kind of went through the process. and got as good as you are today. Um, and I wanted to also touch on something you were talking about, like immersing yourself in hip hop culture to really become a part of breakdancing. I think that one, I think that that's a big step. I think a lot, just because sometimes you will find a lot of like gatekeeping in that kind of like field when it comes to breakdancing, and kind of like anything hip hop oriented. But did you? I guess rather, what was it like for you to be Asian and kind of stepping into that space?
That's actually a great question. I am Asian as well as deaf, and some other identities, of course. Um, and back in that year 2000, there was one Asian group that had formed, and I began associating with them, and I joined the crew, and then I found my way into the breakdancing community and socialized with, various people, various crews. But the additional identity of being deaf um, just caused me to be seen differently. And often there are negative stigmas because deaf people, are presumed that they can't follow the beat. And so we're often marginalized because of that, because we can't hear the music, and maybe some perceptions and attitudes are quite negative. And of that, of course, I was exposed to over the years. And so I learned how to deal with that. And I internalized a lot of that. And so I just had to learn myself how to deal with that, especially as a teenage boy, trying to fit in and trying to, be in the crowd and feel like you belong, as well as being authentic and true to yourself and really discovering who I was and my identity. So there was a lot of internal struggle growing up. But honestly, as an Asian person, I never really thought about my Asian identity predominantly because the deaf identity often was the predominant, most profound and recognizable.
So when you were breakdancing with these groups, how were you able to keep up with them almost? How were you able to kind of like make your mark?
It was tough. Just going back, let me clarify my communication growing up was predominantly oral, reading lips, speaking for myself, and oftentimes there was misinformation, but that was really life, and I just had to deal with that. That was the only way I knew how to communicate, was to just kind of bear with it and deal with some of those inefficiencies, basically. Mm-hmm. And so I just never really thought about that, and I had to learn how to advocate for myself. Eventually, some people did recognize me and my communication needs and got me more involved and supported me, became more advocates. But pretty much most people were doing their own thing. I didn't say they weren't really paying attention to that, so that wasn't really on their radar. I kind of understand, because I kind of do the same thing when I'm in a community, the breakdancing community particularly. I kind of focus on what I need to do to improve and how I can better my skills. And so it's not really a heavily social component. Looking back, I did miss a lot of information. History. Looking back at the hip hop history, which was very crucial. At that time, I didn't really know much about the history. But as I started to see and learn and be exposed to the community through events, I realized that there wasn't a lot of history. I realize now, even more so, that there was a lot of history tied to the culture and the community.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. Yeah.
I want to ask too, and I guess you've kind of already touched on this as well, but in general, to sum it up, how would you say breakdancing has really affected your life?
I would say basically it's the best thing that happened to me in my youth. Again, I grew up very oral, mainstream, meaning predominantly with the hearing persons and speaking for myself and trying to direct communicate with them. And so I couldn't really express myself as well. And so oftentimes there were a lot of things that I missed, whether it's joking back and forth and kids razzing on each other and things of that nature. I would miss a lot. But with breakdancing, I saw an opportunity for me to express myself. And I saw an opportunity there, especially in a circle when you're surrounded by people that are really into the culture. And I can use my entire body to communicate what I'm trying to express, as opposed to just orally, spoken on. And that was my outlet, as well as martial arts. I was very intrigued by martial arts, and so I saw that there was a lot of overlap with martial arts and breakdancing, and I saw both as an opportunity to express myself and to interweave both disciplines, and I was fascinated by them. It wasn't fully accessible, but when looking back, I feel as though my foster home, it was my foster home, and just looking at my hometown compared to that foster home, that community, I felt very much more part of a community, as opposed to when I grew up, which I felt very isolated. And I had a voice in that community. It really helped me to boost my confidence, and I was very isolated, and my confidence was not there. I had lower self-esteem, and so that really helped to boost that and turn that around and help me throughout my life. I'm very thankful for the breakdancing community.
That's so beautiful to me because it's like you found a way to express yourself beyond the normal conventional means of communication. Like you found a physical way to express yourself. Love that.
Often music is used similarly. It's a way of communicating that's past words, and it connects with people because of the human experience and because of the human's ability to kind of feed off of energy from the other people. Like when you're breakdancing, it's very much emotional and creative and flowing, that it seems to like pass along your feelings and your expression to those who are receiving your creative energy. But you mentioned accessibility in your youth, and I was wondering, specific to the music industry, to the dance industry, how is accessibility when it comes to these industries for the deaf community?
From your perspective.
Yeah, from your perspective.
Well, to be honest, I never really fully followed the music entirely. And of course, it helps when the volume is turned up and I can feel the vibrations. And of course, breakdancing relies heavily on rhythm, and I can feel the rhythm when it's turned up, of course. And I can also identify some music and the rhythm in the music, as well as following the rhythm of people's movements, and see them moving and swaying, and then it helps me to memorize the rhythm that way. As far as dance is concerned, well, really in more performing particularly. I think choreography, when I was in a choreographed performance, I really, it was very different because of the fact that everyone had different roles and you're having to work alongside others, which was not as accessible. It was quite delayed. For example, you would see a group over here making a step in a certain direction, and I would be very much delayed, and the timing wasn't there. Mm-hmm. So that kind of thing. I relied very much on visual cues, so I had to constantly keep my eyes open and watch what the other members were doing. And so, but in the moment, I never really thought about it. Looking back, when I see the videos of my performances with the crew, I can notice that I was not in sync with the crew. So there is definitely accessibility problems when it comes to performances and choreography in particular. But when it comes to a dance battle, not so much, because I am just dancing whatever I feel, and it's a form of self-expression that doesn't require syncopation. So there's more accessibility problems when it comes to choreographed performances.
So, from your perspective as well, how do you think that we can get better at in terms of like improving like accessibility in choreographed live performances? Like, how do you think that people can become more inclusive of the deaf community in that regard?
That's really something that I've thought about for quite some time, and it's an ongoing issue. Lighting can often be synced with the sound, and so you can use lighting. I haven't tried it yet personally, but I have heard that that is helpful, because then you can change the lights with the change in sound, and you can also follow the beat that way, as well as visual cues. And so if there's another person in front, for example, perhaps they can clap, and so that way you can follow the beat or the rhythm that way. Or mirrors, so that way you can see another person and keep visual access to what they're doing. That's pretty much all I can think of at this point, but it is a challenging problem to resolve. And so I do always have that in the back of my mind.
I mean, I want to...
Oh, actually, I'm sorry. But there was one more thing I wanted to share. Prep before the performance is very helpful. So if, for example, they share what song is going to be played, then I can study the music before the performance. Obviously, that's not really the point here. The point is live. And so that doesn't necessarily, coincide with what you're asking.
No, but that is still helpful, definitely.
I wanted to, well, before we move on I wanted to add that I'm thinking about this in terms of like live performances, live music performances. Because Shay, we had the deaf inclusion in the master class, or in the music industry master class, and we had Chris Corsini talk about, different ways that like live performances can be improved in terms of choreography, in terms of lighting, in terms of like the structure of the performance to make things more inclusive for audience members. But a lot of the stuff that you mentioned with like the mirrors and all that stuff, that seems like an easy fix that can be really used in like a Beyonce concert and like a large concert for a larger artist. It seems like an easy way to really kind of get started at the very least in terms of inclusion. Would you say so?
I think mirrors, for example, is a pretty easy fix. I don't see that would be a huge challenge. But with structure, could you expand on that? What do you mean regarding structure?
Yeah, so like the same thing that you were talking about, right? Like the lighting, like the structure of the performance. So like the choreography that the dancers on stage, for example, are taught. one of the things that Chris was talking about was finding ways to get ASL into dance moves with dancers on stage.
For deaf attendees, people who are at the concert maybe and watching a performance.
Okay, so of course interpreters give access, but then it's filtered through the interpreter, of course. And so if you are on stage, one way you can sort of mitigate that is a shadow interpreter. So that the interpreter would be on stage shadowing the performer, but that just means the interpreter would have to be able to follow the moves, of course, and shadow the performer around stage. I think that would be more ideal. Obviously, the priority is, in an ideal world, everyone would learn ASL. Yeah, at the minimum, at least gestures, or some way to cue in the deaf participants or performers what is going on, even if it's just gestures or some other way of means of communicating that.
So I have a question that's kind of unrelated to this and more you and your experience. So when you're dancing by yourself alone, maybe you're dancing in your house by yourself, do you get into your own flow, into your own rhythm? Do you have like internal rhythm?
Oftentimes I do have an internal rhythm. Yes, I don't really know how it happens, but just in my mind, I really picture the music. I visualize it. It may seem odd, but I do hear some music. Not often, but there are specific parts of music that I can hear and I can imagine, and I oftentimes will just create the music in my head and I can visualize it and see how the moves would coincide with the music I see in my head. And oftentimes really the rhythm comes from within. I think everyone has their own natural rhythm. And if you just follow your own natural rhythm as a foundation, I think that works. So your own natural rhythm often coincides with how you're feeling in that moment and your identity. And it just really becomes your rhythm and who you are.
That's almost like your own creative process. It feels like you're creating this melody and music in your head, visualizing it even. So it is like almost like multiple different layers of creativity because you're forming this mental state for yourself while you're also physically getting in sync with what you're visualizing in your head. I know that's a comment, that's not a question, but just an observation.
Yeah, it's like you have to really train your body to follow the rhythm. Some people can keep their mind and body in tune, and some can't. It doesn't involve a lot of complex moves of breakdancing, and so while growing up, it wasn't really conscious. But as I got older, I became more conscious of being able to sync my mind with my body or my heart, and make sure that my whole body is moving in its own internal rhythm.
Wow, that's really really fascinating, and I feel like a lot of people don't really get this perspective, especially when it comes to like somebody who's a part of the deaf community, like dancing and engaging in like breakdancing. Um, I really kind of want to talk about the work that you have been doing with Definitely Inc. and how you transfer, what you've learned about your own body and your own creative process and your own rhythm, how you transfer that to the youth that you work with Definitely Inc. as a breakdancing coach.
First off, I want to show them that they can do it. They can learn. If you have the motivation and the passion, do it. Go for it. I just show the method. And as I mentioned before, when I was younger, it was just me. And I had low self-esteem and a lot of negative self-talk. And so I don't want the youth to go through that. I want them to believe that they can do it, regardless of whatever your hearing loss is. If you can or can't hear, it does not matter. You still have your internal rhythm. And so just, you have a way of expressing yourself. So just, I try to draw that out of them and try to keep the negative thoughts at bay and just encourage them and build up their esteem. Secondly, of course, is the physical component. And when it comes to breakdancing, everyone has their own style. So what I do is make sure that it is accessible. And that is a priority, to make sure that it is accessible. Especially certain things in breakdancing can be overlooked. Certain techniques can be overlooked. There was a lot that I had missed, and now looking back, it was obvious that I missed those techniques that at that time I wasn't aware, and you don't know what you don't know. So I couldn't see it, but I want to share that information and pass on that knowledge from what I have learned and some hard lessons that I've learned and my experiences, and be able to pass it on to the youth so they can pick it up even better than I could at that age.
Wow. I was just gonna say that's incredible to me, because I know the last piece that the last interview that we did, we were talking a lot about legacy, right? And we were talking about the importance of leaving a legacy. So I love that you took a look at the experience that you had coming up, and you decided, like, I don't want other people that identify the same way I identify to go through the same thing that I went through. You dedicated your entire like like career to doing what you do. And like that, to me, that's just inspiring. And I really know that that's going to have like a lasting impact. I just wanted to say that. Same thing with Shay. Like, it wasn't a question; it was just a comment that I was making. But I found that inspirational.
Thank you. I really never thought about it as a legacy, and it's just really the idea of passing on my experiences to the youth and showing them that they can do it. That's was really my driving force. The third point is what I want to convey to them is basically that they have a role model, because when I was young, I didn't have a role model. I grew up mainstream, meaning no other deaf colleagues or fellow students that I could grow up with. I grew up with the majority of hearing people. And so I didn't have anyone to be able to support me. I kind of had to find my own path. And so if they have an adult, someone that can be as a mentor, it can help alleviate some of those frustrations. So I think it's really more of, just going back to your question, passing on that creativity. And I think it's just how to not pass on my creativity, but just simply, like you said, being a gatekeeper, right? So opening the gate for them to be able to express themselves in their own style, in their own way, and find their voice. I just show them the foundational moves and then hope to foster their own creativity and growth, and they can find their own moves.
That is so essential. And I feel like by giving them the ability to breakdance, you're also giving them a voice, because I'm sure as youth who are part of the deaf community, maybe they are in a hearing environment, and so they might feel isolated and have struggles with mental health because they are having these frustrations. But being able to express themselves is really empowering for these youth. And that's something that's lasting. That's telling them that they can do something, whereas maybe they're being told that they can't do many things. it's just it's giving the power, giving them the and opening their creative minds to all of the possibilities. That's also another question, but
I feel like we're just really like talking a lot about, because like this is amazing to me, and I know to Shay as well. Like the fact that like this is even something that's possible, right? Like I mean, this is incredible the work that you're doing, and like I know, I think this is kind of a broad thing too, but like I think that sometimes, speaking from part of like a marginalized community, I'll say that sometimes I've been in spaces where I felt like I didn't really have a voice. I didn't really know how to speak up. I didn't really know how to express myself. And I understand how that felt for me. And now for me, I'm like getting this perspective of how it feels for somebody who's a part of the deaf community. It's like that same sort of feeling, but it's in a different sort of way. You know, like it's not something that's as easily pushed past as what I know I was going through at a time when I was, you know, younger. So to me, this whole conversation is just inspirational in that regard.
Absolutely. That's a big part of why I felt an affinity to the deaf community, or excuse me, to the breakdancing community, and hip hop community. Um, and just as a marginalized person, I can appreciate their experiences, and um, I feel in tune with them, because there are different marginalized groups that, regardless of identity, that have a lot of parallels. Right, various groups with various identities have similar experiences, and so in breakdancing, I saw a lot of um, perspective in the culture and in that community, and comparing that to my town, which is predominantly white, suburban, and their viewpoints, which was different. It's very different.
For sure, for sure. So I wanted to ask this kind of like a summary type of question, which is kind of broad. I'm curious about where you see yourself in your practice right now in the next 5 years. Is there anything that you want to do more with Definitely Inc? Do you want to branch off and expand what you already do to other communities, or how do like where do you see yourself with this in 5 years?
I could see myself still being involved with Definitely Inc. Absolutely. I hope to see some of those kids grow and gain more skills, and I'll be still here to support them. But honestly, uh, it's an open book. I can't really visualize what's going to happen in 5 years because a lot of things could change between now and then. But my hope is that I will provide them a path and a way to express themselves, and the rest is really up to them. And how they take that knowledge and grow from there is really, it's up to them. But generally, as far as ongoing work, I want to continue to support the youth and show them that they can find a voice in breakdancing in other ways too. They can express themselves. But I want to show them that it is possibility for them.
That's beautiful. I think that having teachers like you is really really important. Just because,
mentors like you.
yeah, just because like it really only takes one person to really set somebody off on an entirely new bright path, bright future for themselves. I love the fact that you bring out the best in the people that you're doing, and I just want to let you know that your work is important. I appreciate it. I really do, and it means a lot to me.
Well, I think it's important for our viewers, our readers, our listeners, our followers to get your perspective and also to continue this conversation. You know, we've started the conversation of deaf inclusion in the music industry, but it's a conversation that we are going to continue. It should have already been started. And I feel like it has, but not to the degree needed to make the music industry and the dance industry completely accessible and the full experience for the deaf community. So I'm wondering, this doesn't need to be a set of instructions, more advice for those who are going to see this interview. What is it that they should be pushing for, or that they should be aware of while they are, because we have artists who are making music, we have business professionals, we have young aspiring creatives. What advice would you have for them?
Advice. Everything starts with awareness. Start asking questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I remember some people were very apprehensive in asking me a question because they were afraid of offending me. And I'm here to say that I'm open, and just don't be afraid to ask questions. Try to learn more about the culture. Try to learn more about other cultures. Learn more about the deaf culture. Try to learn some signs. Learning signs is a great next step. It's a little thing, but it can go a long way.
I was actually gonna ask you at the end of the interview if you could teach us a sign, maybe like breakdancing or something that, because I do know, and I love to share this, the cultural reset, just for our listeners to like get little tidbits. But if you want to share some right now, I'm so willing to learn.
Yeah.
Sure. So teach you some signs. Sure. Okay. Obviously, this is dance. And I kind of use this sign as breakdancing.
Okay.
With this hand shape, which represents your legs being bent. Right?
Oh, nice. Like a sort of like I don't know what the move is, but like when you're spinning around.
Right. You're talking about footwork.
Yeah.
There's a 6-step in breakdancing. There's the 6-step in floor work, right? If you're talking about a windmill, then that would be signed this way or this way. That's where your legs are in a split, and then this represents your arm.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
And then dancing.
Right, that's dance. Head spins.
Oh my gosh. So is this how you teach your classes? How do you actually communicate with your students and teach them? Do you show them the moves?
I actually do. I teach them the sign when I'm trying to describe how your legs need to move. I do show them this way. For your arms, I try to visually model where their arms are supposed to be. And if you're trying to do a windmill, I try to show this way in a smaller scale model, and then try to show them on larger scale on my actual person what it would look like.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay. So I feel like we've learned a lot with this interview. I know I have, because I never got a chance to really take ASL in any sort of institution that I was in because it was just never taught, which I think is a testament to how we kind of need to integrate that into our academic system so everybody can really learn it and so everything can really be accessible.
At least simple things, at least the alphabet.
Exactly. Same,
Right?
same wavelength, at least the alphabet. So I know that I personally, as somebody who doesn't really know ASL, like I definitely want to learn it. And now, like, I really, really feel like that's something that I think is important. So I'm going to commit myself to learning it. And I would encourage anybody who's watching to also commit themselves to learning it as well, because that's really kind of how this all starts, right? It starts with people. It's the same thing with pronouns too, like using like they them pronouns, she her, like asking people what their pronouns are. It starts when you make the decision and say, hey, I'm going to be more accessible, I'm going to be more inclusive. Like you saying, hey, I'm going to learn ASL, hey, I'm going to ask somebody what their pronouns are. Like it's kind of the same thing on that regard. So I'm going to commit myself to it. And hopefully maybe we can circle back in a couple
I'll start with teaching Nick the alphabet, because I know some sign. My mom actually, when I was in like kindergarten, preschool, and we were waiting in the car, to be dropped off for school, she would teach me ASL. And so I know the alphabet, and I know a few other signs, like, the different colors, and how old are you? So it's just like little things, but I'm so excited because I know that and I'm going to say this here because we are going to be releasing this interview in when I hope we're having this event. But I'm really excited because I think that I might have the opportunity to experience Definitely Inc. And I am definitely going to be practicing my ASL before then, because I would love to be able to talk to the youth dancers and like hear what's up with them. And I really, really love just like sign language in general. It's really just a fun and creative and dynamic language, with your hands, which is incredible. I mean, like, communicating with just your hands, um it brings it all together. I mean, I'm really, really excited for that opportunity.
Sure. I want to, if I can add to that, it's not just your hands, it's your facial expressions. A lot of times people believe it's just on your hands, but you have to include your face. It just says right now, as I'm signing, you see that my face is moving. It's not just your hands, it's your arms, it's your body. There's linguistic information in there, even just how your mouth moves, for example.
It's almost like your tone of voice. Inclusive.
Yes. Yeah. For example, if you were to ask a question, your facial expression could be this way. Or if you were to ask a yes or no question, your facial expression would be this way. So that's going to indicate what kind of question, whether it's an open or a closed question. Mm-hmm. And your facial expression will show that. You can also use the same exact sign, but a different facial expression will have a different meaning. For example, this sign. You can sign, oh, that's awful, it's terrible, in that way. Or in a positive way, which means that's really wonderful, versus that's terrible.
Oh, so it really is full body naturally.
Right. So the important thing is that the whole entire, your face and your body expresses linguistic information.
Yeah. Wow.
Thank you for sharing that. No, thank you for correcting me.
Sure.
That's really interesting. So with that being said, I guess a final note to the people who are watching this. I hope you learned a lot, because I learned a lot. I know we all learned a lot. And I really encourage you to definitely keep up with Definitely Inc. and everything that they're doing for the deaf creative arts community, everything that they're doing for the youth. They're an incredible organization. Definitely shout out to them, and definitely shout out to you, John Ying, for coming on and just have a conversation about the work that you do. And I really hope that everybody has learned something through this and can really better themselves. I also wanted to say too, thank you, Brent, for coming on as an ASL interpreter. I really appreciate you being here as well.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you.
All right, everybody.
Bye, everybody. We'll see you next week.
All right. See you later.